Welcome in. Some Washington quarters look completely ordinary until you examine the tiny details collectors care about most. Today, we are uncovering how condition, mint marks, rare errors, and exceptional preservation can turn everyday-looking coins into serious collector finds. First coin. The 1967 Washington quarter is the kind of coin that can disappear into a handful of ordinary change without giving away the story hidden in its surfaces. More than $1 billion was struck, it carries no mint mark, and its copper-nickel appearance is familiar enough that most people would never examine one twice. Yet those very facts can be misleading, because the collector market does not judge this quarter simply by the date stamped beneath George Washington's portrait. It judges individual coins by preservation, strike, surface quality, eye appeal, whether they are ordinary circulation strikes or special mint set pieces, and in unusual cases, whether a genuine mint-made variety or error is present. A worn example and an exceptionally preserved certified example may share the same date while occupying completely different levels of the numismatic market. That distinction becomes especially important with this issue because enormous production numbers did not translate into enormous numbers of virtually flawless survivors. Later, we will examine what authenticated examples have actually sold for, why extraordinary auction results should never be applied to an ordinary quarter, and which characteristics professional collectors examine before deciding that a 1967 quarter deserves serious attention. The real mystery, therefore, is not whether 1967 quarters exist in large numbers. They certainly do, but how an apparently common coin can become dramatically harder to locate once the standards are raised from merely surviving to surviving in remarkable condition. To understand that contradiction, the quarter has to be placed inside one of the most disruptive periods in modern American coinage. The United States had experienced a severe coin shortage during the middle of the 1960s, while rising silver prices and widespread hoarding complicated the government's effort to keep enough coins in commerce. The Coinage Act of 1965 removed silver from the dime and quarter and introduced the copper-nickel-clad construction that remains familiar today. By 1967, the mint was producing fractional coinage on an enormous scale to restore an adequate circulating supply. The Washington quarter alone reached a mintage of 1,524,031,848 pieces, more than twice the highest mintage achieved by any earlier 90% silver Washington quarter issue. Production records show that the year's quarters were manufactured through Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities, but none carried a mint mark because mint marks had been temporarily eliminated from circulating coinage from 1965 through 1967 as part of the government's attempt to discourage collecting and hoarding by mint location. That is why the absence of a mint mark on a normal 1967 quarter is not an error and does not automatically make the coin rare. The standard circulation strike is catalogued as a 5.67-gram coin measuring 24.3 millimeters in diameter, with a reeded edge and a bonded clad structure consisting of copper-nickel outer layers over a pure copper center. Its overall composition is commonly described as 75% copper and 25% nickel over that copper core. The reddish copper line visible along much of the edge is therefore normal evidence of the layered construction, not damage and not proof that something is wrong with the coin. Visually, the 1967 quarter retained John Flanagan's long-established Washington design, first introduced on the denomination in 1932. The obverse presents Washington facing left, surrounded by liberty, in God we trust, and the date, while the reverse shows the heraldic eagle with spread wings perched above a bundle of arrows, framed by United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. Those familiar devices become surprisingly important when grading an uncirculated example because collectors are not simply asking whether all the words remain readable. They are studying the highest points of the design for friction, the fields for abrasions, the cheek and hair of Washington for contact marks, and the eagle's breast and feathers for evidence of strike weakness or wear. A circulated coin can retain excellent detail and still be worth only a modest premium because true mint state grading requires the absence of circulation wear. Once a coin qualifies as mint state, the numerical grade from MS60 through MS70 becomes increasingly dependent on surface preservation, luster, strike, marks, and overall eye appeal. An MS63 coin may be unquestionably uncirculated but visibly marked. An MS65 must present substantially cleaner surfaces. MS66 becomes more demanding. An MS67 or MS68 quality requires an exceptional combination that very few mass-produced quarters achieved. PCGS notes that even examples specifically selected by submitters for quality frequently grade only MS65 or MS66, illustrating why the billion-plus mintage tells only part of the rarity story. This is condition rarity. The date itself is common, while individual coins become scarce at the extreme upper end of preservation. That condition rarity is where collector value begins separating dramatically from face value, but realistic expectations matter. Ordinary circulated 1967 quarters are not $1,000 coins simply because they are old, and even many uncirculated examples remain affordable. Current grading information illustrates how sharply the market can change at the highest levels. NGC's published guide has placed MS67 examples in the hundreds of dollars and MS68 examples in the several $1,000 range. Although guides are estimates rather than guaranteed selling prices, and markets can change. A spectacular certified business strike once produced an even more dramatic result. PCGS records an auction price of $8,813 for an MS68 example sold through Heritage Auctions in January 2017. That result does not mean a 1967 quarter found in a change jar is worth $8,813. It means a professionally graded coin at an extraordinary preservation level attracted competitive collector demand at that particular auction. In a different transaction, PCGS records an MS67 Plus example selling for $850 in 2020, demonstrating how much difference a fraction of a grading point, population, appearance, and timing can make. Depending on certification, grade, market conditions, and competitive demand, exceptional pieces can therefore enter ranges such as roughly $1,300, $2,600, or $3,900, but those figures should be understood as plausible high-end collector territory rather than automatic values attached to the date. A raw coin advertised online at a spectacular asking price proves nothing by itself. Completed sales of correctly attributed, professionally graded coins are far more meaningful than unsold listings, and the extraordinary historical auction record belongs to a very unusual certified specimen. There is another side of the 1967 quarter story that can easily confuse collectors: the special mint set issue. Traditional proof sets and regular uncirculated mint sets had been suspended during the coin shortage era, and from 1965 through 1967, the mint offered special mint sets as an alternative collector product. Approximately 1.86 million 1967 sets were produced, and the coins occupy an unusual category between ordinary circulation strikes and conventional proofs. NGC explains that these pieces were produced specifically for collectors with additional minting attention and distinctive finishes, yet they were not traditional proofs. The 1966 and 1967 SMS coins often display more brilliant fields than earlier examples, and some exhibit cameo or even highly desirable deep ultra cameo contrast, where frosted design elements stand strongly against reflective fields. This distinction matters enormously because a 1967 SMS quarter should not be casually compared with a normal business strike simply because both lack mint marks. PCGS separately recognizes standard SMS, cameo, and deep cameo pieces, and it also recognizes specific double-die varieties within the SMS population. A particularly striking illustration of the premium possible for exceptional contrast is PCGS's auction record of $4,465 for an SB68 Deep Cameo 1967 SMS quarter sold by Heritage in 2017. Again, that number belongs to an extraordinary certified coin, not to every quarter removed from a 1967 special mint set. The majority of SMS quarters are nowhere near that value. What created the premium was the combination of extremely high technical quality, special strike status, strong contrast, certification, and collector competition. Because SMS coins were not individually protected from every contact during manufacture and packaging. Pristine surfaces can still be difficult to achieve, making the finest survivors disproportionately important. Varieties and genuine mint errors add another layer, but this is also where misinformation can become expensive. PCGS recognizes, among other SMS varieties, the FS101 double die obverse and FS801 double die reverse. A true double die results from the way the die itself was created, so the doubling appears consistently in specific design elements on coins struck from that die. It should not be confused with flat, shelf-like machine doubling or ordinary post-mint damage. Authentication therefore requires more than noticing that a letter looks unusual under magnification. Specialists compare the location, direction, shape, and strength of doubling with documented diagnostics. Genuine striking errors can also occur in coin production. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet pieces, missing clad layers, and other abnormalities are known across modern United States coinage. But any dramatic claim involving a 1967 quarter needs evidence. A coin with environmental discoloration is not automatically a missing clad layer error. A damaged rim is not necessarily a planchet clip, and a quarter that weighs incorrectly because material has been removed cannot be diagnosed from weight alone. A normal example should be close to its specified 5.67 grams, but precision scales, microscopic inspection, metal characteristics, edge examination, and comparison with authenticated examples may all be needed when something genuinely unusual appears. Third-party certification from an established grading service becomes particularly important when a supposed error or valuable variety could command substantial money. Authentication protects both buyer and seller by establishing that the coin is genuine, identifying the recognized attribution when appropriate, and assigning a standardized grade. It also helps separate legitimate numismatic discoveries from altered pieces, plated coins, chemically treated surfaces, fabricated errors, and misleading online descriptions. Preservation can be just as important as discovery because a collector can permanently reduce the desirability of an otherwise impressive quarter in seconds. Never polish a 1967 quarter to make it brighter. Never use abrasive cleaners, metal polish, baking soda, brushes, or household chemicals in an attempt to restore its original appearance. Professional graders can identify cleaning through unnatural luster, hairlines, disturbed surfaces, and altered texture, and a cleaned coin may receive a details designation rather than the straight numerical grade that high-end collectors generally prefer. Handle a potentially important coin only by its edges, ideally over a soft, clean surface, and avoid touching the obverse or reverse because fingerprints contain oils and salts that can leave permanent marks. Temporary protection: use an inert, properly sized coin holder. For valuable certified pieces, leave the coin sealed in its professional holder and store it in a stable environment away from excessive humidity, heat, and chemical fumes. Unlike copper cents, Washington quarters are not normally marketed using the brown, and red color classifications associated with copper coinage. Collectors instead evaluate their natural tunning, brightness, luster, contrast, and overall eye appeal. Attractive original tunning can be desirable, while suspiciously uniform or artificial coloration may raise concerns. Strike quality also deserves close inspection. A blazing coin with few marks can still be held back if important design areas are weakly defined, while a sharply struck example with smooth fields and strong original luster can stand out immediately. At the MS67 and MS68 levels, tiny differences matter enormously because collectors assembling top registry sets may compete for a very small number of coins certified near the top of the population. That competition, rather than the mere age of the quarter, helps explain why one exceptional specimen can sell for thousands, while another seemingly similar piece remains inexpensive. The most useful way to approach a 1967 Washington quarter, then, is to treat it as a coin that must earn its rarity rather than assuming rarity from its date. Begin by confirming the basic characteristics. No mint mark is normal. The standard weight is approximately 5.67 grams. The diameter is 24.3 millimeters. The edge is reeded, and the copper-nickel-clad construction should be consistent with the issue. Then determine whether the coin shows genuine circulation wear or remains mint state. Examine Washington's cheek, hair, jaw, and the surrounding fields under good neutral lighting. Then turn to the eagle and inspect the breast, wings, lettering, and open fields for friction, hits, strike weakness, or unusual doubling. If the surfaces appear unusually reflective, investigate whether the piece could be from a special mint set rather than immediately calling it a proof or a rare business strike. If a suspected double die or major mint error is present, compare it with established diagnostics before assigning any premium. Most importantly, separate asking prices from authenticated auction evidence. The 1967 quarter's huge mintage of more than 1.52 billion pieces guarantees that ordinary examples are not inherently rare. Yet the documented market for superb business strikes and exceptional SMS deep cameo coins proves that condition and specialization can transform the collector significance of an individual specimen. The celebrated $8,813 business strike auction record and $4,465 SMS deep cameo record represent exceptional certified coins under specific market conditions, not promises about what another example will bring. For a genuinely outstanding coin, values in the low thousands can be realistic when grade, rarity, attribution, eye appeal, certification, and demand support them. For the overwhelming majority, they are not. That is ultimately what makes this quarter worth studying. Its secret is not hidden in the date alone, but in the remarkably small details that separate an everyday survivor from a coin advanced collectors may spend years trying to acquire. Next coin. The 1977 D Washington quarter is a fascinating reminder that a coin does not have to begin life as a rarity to become intensely interesting at the highest levels of collecting. Hundreds of millions were produced, countless pieces passed through cash registers and vending machines, and worn examples can still turn up decades later with little fanfare. Yet serious Washington quarter specialists look at this Denver issue through a much narrower lens. They are searching for coins that escaped circulation entirely, survived decades without damaging contact, retained strong original mint luster, and possessed the unusually clean surfaces necessary for elite mint state grades. That search transforms an apparently ordinary quarter into a condition rarity challenge. A tiny mark across Washington's cheek, a trace of friction on a high point, a weakly struck detail, or unattractive surface deterioration can separate a desirable certified coin from one that advanced collectors will pass over. Later, the authenticated auction history of this issue will show exactly why it is important to distinguish a genuinely exceptional specimen from an ordinary 1977 D quarter, and why grade, originality, strike, eye appeal, professional authentication, and the population of comparable coins matter far more than sensational claims attached to the date. The story becomes even more interesting because 1977 marked the return of the traditional Washington quarter appearance after the nation's bicentennial coinage, placing this Denver issue at a recognizable turning point in the long-running series. That return to the familiar design came during a changing period in American history. The country was emerging from the bicentennial celebration while dealing with the economic difficulties that characterized much of the 1970s, including persistent inflation and concerns about energy, employment, and the purchasing power of the dollar. The quarter itself had already undergone its most important metallic transformation more than a decade earlier. Beginning in 1965, rising silver prices and a national coin shortage had pushed the United States away from the traditional 90% silver quarter toward copper-nickel-clad coinage. By 1977, that clad construction was thoroughly established. The Denver Mint struck 256,524,978 Washington quarters that year, and unlike the quarters of 1965 through 1967, mint marks had returned, so the small d identifies Denver production. The standard 1977 D weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters across, and carries a reeded edge. Its metallic construction consists of copper-nickel outer layers bonded to a pure copper center, with the outer alloy described as 75% copper and 25% nickel. That layered structure explains the copper-colored band commonly visible along the edge of circulated examples. It is a normal feature, not evidence that the coin has been damaged or that its outer layer is missing. The enormous Denver mintage also establishes the first essential rule for evaluating this issue: the date and mint mark alone do not make it rare. PCGS classifies the 1977 D as a common date in ordinary grades, which means any meaningful premium must come from something more specific than simply finding a quarter bearing those characters. Its appearance connects 1977 directly with one of America's longest-lived circulating coin designs. Sculptor John Flanagan created the Washington quarter, introduced in 1932 for the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, adapting the first president's profile into a restrained portrait that became instantly recognizable to generations of Americans. On the 1977 D obverse, Washington faces left beneath Liberty, with "In God W.E. Trust" positioned to the left and the date below. The Denver mint mark appears near Washington's tied hair, distinguishing the coin from the Philadelphia issue. The reverse restored Flanagan's traditional heraldic eagle after Jack L.R.'s colonial drummer had occupied the reverse of the bicentennial quarter. The eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows, accompanied by olive branches and the inscriptions United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. That restoration is historically important because the regular eagle reverse had temporarily disappeared during the bicentennial program and returned in 1977. For collectors evaluating quality, however, the artistic details become practical grading tools. Washington's cheek and jaw are broad, exposed areas where contact marks can be immediately distracting. The hair, neck, and surrounding fields can reveal friction or weakness, while the reverse eagle provides additional clues in the breast, feathers, wing detail, and open fields. Because quarters were produced as working money rather than individually protected collectibles, freshly struck coins could collide with one another during high-speed handling, transportation, bagging, and storage. A coin, therefore, did not need to circulate for years to acquire marks. Many technically uncirculated quarters entered rolls or bags already carrying enough abrasions to prevent them from ever approaching the highest mint state grades. This is where the population story begins to overturn the impression created by the quarter-billion-piece mintage. PCGS estimates that tens of millions of 1977 D quarters survive overall and that millions may survive at MS-65 or better, so this is certainly not a conventional rarity. PCGS's expert commentary describes pieces below MS-66 as common, MS-66 as somewhat scarce, and MS-67 as much tougher, historically noting only a limited number of confirmed examples at that level. Population figures are not permanent. They can change as new coins are submitted, existing coins are resubmitted, and grading data are updated, but the underlying lesson remains stable. Extreme quality is far less available than ordinary quality. Professional mint state grading runs from MS-60 through MS-70, and each step upward imposes increasingly demanding expectations. An MS-60 coin can remain technically uncirculated while displaying numerous distracting marks. MS-63 should offer a more acceptable overall appearance, while MS-64 and MS-65 progressively reward cleaner surfaces, stronger luster, and better visual balance. At MS-66, marks become fewer and less disruptive, and at MS-67, the combination of preservation, eye appeal, luster, and strike must be exceptionally strong. PCGS currently displays the 1977 D with MS68 as its top-grade category, reinforcing just how different the finest known material is from the vast population of ordinary survivors. Unlike copper cents, these clad quarters do not use the familiar brown, and red grading color designations. Instead, collectors pay close attention to original brilliance, natural toning, surface texture, luster, and overall eye appeal. A lightly toned coin can be beautiful and original. A harshly cleaned coin can appear bright while being far less desirable. The market evidence makes an important correction to the kind of exaggerated numbers often attached to modern quarters online. Reliable published records do not support treating an ordinary 1977D Washington quarter as a coin routinely worth $1,000, $2,000, or $4,000. In fact, PCGS currently lists the auction record for the regular 1977D quarter as $459.99, rounded to $460, for a PCGS MS67 example sold through eBay in April 2023. PCGS also cautions that it does not take responsibility for the accuracy or authenticity of eBay listings included in its auction database. That documented figure is far below the four-figure examples sometimes associated with other Washington quarter dates or genuinely rare eras, and inventing a higher record would create a false impression of the market. The Philadelphia 1977 quarter illustrates why mint attribution matters. PCGS records a completely different auction history for that issue, including a $2,550 result for an MS67 Plus example in 2021. But that sale belongs to the Philadelphia coin, not the 1977D, and should never be transferred to the Denver issue merely because the dates match. For the Denver quarter, value increases as certified quality becomes more difficult to obtain, but the market must be judged from actual comparable transactions, current population data, and present demand. A raw quarter described by an online seller as rare, with an asking price of $1,700 or $3,400, is not evidence that collectors are actually paying those amounts. Asking prices can be created by anyone. Completed transactions involving correctly identified and independently graded coins provide far stronger evidence. This distinction is essential for responsible numismatics because it allows the genuine condition rarity of the 1977D to remain interesting without turning an ordinary circulation coin into something it is not. Errors require the same discipline. Modern quarters can exist with legitimate mint-made abnormalities, but a dramatic-looking 1977D should never be declared valuable until the cause of the anomaly is understood. Genuine U.S. mint errors can include off-center strikes, multiple strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet strikes, and problems involving clad layers. But the existence of those error categories across U.S. coinage does not prove that any particular 1977D possesses one. PCGS's standard coin facts listing for the 1977D quarter does not identify a major recognized variety alongside the regular issue, so claims of a famous doubled die or other major cataloged variety should be approached cautiously unless they can be matched to an authoritative attribution. This matters because mechanical doubling, die deterioration, ordinary die chips, impact damage, corrosion, plating, heat exposure, and deliberate alteration can all produce strange appearances. A genuine doubled die is a die variety created during die manufacture, meaning coins struck from that affected die repeat characteristic doubling in specific design elements. A double-struck coin is different. It has physically received more than one strike. Beginners often confuse these completely different phenomena. Weight can provide another clue, but should never be the only test. A normal 1977D should be close to its specified 5.67 grams, allowing for legitimate manufacturing tolerance and subsequent wear. An unusual weight may justify further examination, especially if the edge or color also appears abnormal, but it does not automatically establish a wrong planchet or missing clad error. Serious authentication combines accurate measurement, magnification, design diagnostics, metal characteristics, edge inspection, and when the potential value warrants it, examination by an established third-party grading service. Preservation becomes especially important when a 1977D appears unusually clean, because the difference between an attractive raw quarter and a genuinely high-end mint state specimen can come down to details that are easy to destroy. Cleaning is one of the fastest ways to compromise those details. Polishing the surfaces, rubbing them with cloth, using jewelry cleaner, applying baking soda, brushing away tunning, or attempting to make the coin look new can leave microscopic hairlines and unnatural texture that experienced graders recognize immediately. Original mint luster is created by metal flow during striking. It cannot be recreated by making the surface shiny. Under a moving light source, an untouched mint state quarter can display the rotating cartwheel effect collectors associate with original luster, while an improperly cleaned surface may look flat, glossy, or uneven. When examining a promising specimen, hold it only by the edge and inspect it under a strong but neutral light without rubbing away fingerprints or residue. Washington's cheek deserves particular attention because even small marks in that open focal area can affect eye appeal. Then study the fields, lettering, hair, neck, eagle, and reverse devices for signs of wear or contact. If the coin appears substantially better than ordinary roll material, place it in an inert holder made for long-term numismatic storage. Avoid soft PVC holders that can release chemicals over time, and keep valuable coins away from excessive moisture, temperature swings, sulfur-rich materials, and other contaminants. A coin already certified by PCGS, NGC, or another respected service should normally remain in its holder unless there is a compelling professional reason to do otherwise. Preservation does not manufacture rarity, but it protects the qualities upon which high-grade rarity depends. What ultimately gives the 1977 D. Washington quarter lasting collector interest is the contrast between abundance and perfection. Its 256,524,978 piece mintage ensures that the issue remains readily available as a date-and mint representative, yet collectors attempting high-grade Washington quarter sets face a different challenge. Finding specimens with exceptional surfaces, powerful original luster, a satisfying strike, and enough visual quality to compete near the top of the certified population. PCGS Survival Estimates place the issue firmly in common rarity territory overall, while its expert commentary makes clear that the difficulty increases significantly around MS-66 and especially MS-67. That is why two quarters struck at Denver during the same year can have radically different numismatic importance, even though their designs, dimensions, composition, and mint marks are identical. One may have spent years in commerce and remain little more than a historical keepsake. Another may have been protected almost immediately and survived with remarkable preservation. Authentication then determines whether the surfaces are original. Professional grading establishes where the coin fits on the mint state scale, and the marketplace decides what collectors are willing to pay at a particular moment. The verified auction information available today does not justify claiming routine four-figure values for the regular 1977D, and that factual limitation actually makes the real collecting challenge clearer. The important question is not whether every 1977D quarter is secretly valuable. It is whether an individual example possesses the combination of grade, originality, strike, eye appeal, recognized error status, if applicable, certification, and scarcity at its quality level that advanced collectors genuinely pursue. In a series filled with coins produced by the hundreds of millions, the 1977D demonstrates one of numismatics' most enduring principles. Sometimes rarity is not created when the coin is struck. It emerges gradually as nearly every other example loses the extraordinary condition required to stand apart. Next coin. At first glance, the 1978 Washington quarter gives almost nothing away. Its familiar portrait of George Washington, silver-gray clad surfaces, and traditional eagle reverse make it look like exactly what it was intended to be: ordinary American spending money. but place a carefully preserved example beneath a strong light and begin examining it the way an experienced numismatist would, and the investigation changes. The first questions are deceptively simple. Is there a mint mark? Has the coin actually circulated? Are the surfaces original, or have they been cleaned? Does the luster move naturally across the fields? How sharp is Washington's hair, and how well defined are the eagle's feathers? Are those unusual marks evidence of the minting process, or merely damage acquired years later? These questions matter because the 1978 quarter is a classic example of a coin whose enormous production total hides a much smaller population of pieces surviving at the highest levels of preservation. Serious collectors are not paying attention because every example is rare. They are paying attention because extraordinary quality can be surprisingly difficult to find within an overwhelmingly common issue. As we examine the coin more closely, the differences between Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco production will become important, along with an unusual West Point connection invisible on the coin itself. Later, authenticated auction results will reveal what exceptional examples have actually achieved and why those figures belong only to coins with the grade, originality, certification, and eye appeal to justify them, not to every quarter carrying the same date. Before judging condition, turn the coin toward the date and look just behind Washington's tied hair, because the presence or absence of a mint mark immediately tells us something important. A normal 1978 circulation quarter without a mint mark is generally catalogued as the Philadelphia issue, while a D identifies Denver production. Philadelphia's reported mintage was an enormous 521,452,000 pieces, compared with 287,373,152 at Denver. There is an intriguing complication hidden inside that Philadelphia figure. During the late 1970s, production demands were high enough that the West Point facility in New York helped manufacture quarters. PCGS reports that Walter Breen attributed approximately 20.8 million of the no-mint mark 1978 quarters to West Point, with that production incorporated into the Philadelphia mintage total. Unlike the famous West Point quarters released decades later with a W, these coins received no identifying mint mark. Consequently, there is no reliable visual method for taking a random no-mint mark 1978 quarter and proving that it was struck at West Point rather than Philadelphia. That historical mystery is fascinating, but it should never be used to advertise an ordinary coin as a confirmed rare 1978 W. Meanwhile, San Francisco produced 3,127,781 proof quarters for collectors, identifiable by their S, mint mark, and specialized proof manufacture. All of this unfolded during a difficult economic period in which inflation remained a major concern for American households and businesses. The mint's priority with circulating quarters was practical: produce enough durable coinage to support commerce. The 1978 quarter therefore emerged not as a commemorative rarity, but as high-volume money, making its later condition rarity a consequence of survival rather than intentional scarcity. Now hold a normal circulation strike by its edge, because its physical construction tells the next part of the story. The standard 1978 quarter weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. Its metallic structure consists of copper-nickel outer layers over a pure copper center, with the outer alloy composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The copper-colored line commonly visible around the edge is therefore completely normal and should not be mistaken for an error. John Flanagan's Washington design, originally introduced in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, remained on the coin. Washington faces left on the obverse, surrounded by liberty, in God we trust, and the date. On the reverse, the heraldic eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows, complemented by olive branches and the familiar inscriptions United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and $quarter. By 1978, this eagle design had only recently returned after the special bicentennial reverse used for the 1,776 1976 quarters. Under magnification, those artistic elements become diagnostic territory. Start with Washington's cheek, an exposed focal area where contact marks are immediately visible, then inspect the jaw, hair, neck, lettering, and surrounding fields. On the reverse, study the eagle's breast, wings, feather definition, arrows, and open areas for strike weakness, abrasions, or friction. Because circulation quarters were struck rapidly and handled in bulk, coins could acquire contact marks before ever reaching a cash register. That is why uncirculated does not automatically mean flawless. A quarter can retain complete original mint luster, yet carry enough bag marks and contact abrasions to prevent it from receiving a premium gem grade. The real challenge appears when we stop asking whether the quarter is uncirculated and begin asking how exceptional it is within mint state. Professional grading services use the Sheldon numerical scale, with uncirculated coins ranging from MS60 through the theoretical perfection of MS70. At the lower mint state levels, numerous contact marks and distracting imperfections can remain. Moving through MS63, MS64, and MS65, collectors expect progressively cleaner surfaces, stronger visual appeal, an attractive original luster. By MS66 and MS67, small differences that casual observers might overlook become financially important. PCGS describes the 1978 Philadelphia issue as readily obtainable in circulated grades and somewhat more challenging in uncirculated condition, but MS67 becomes scarce. Its published survival estimates illustrate the enormous gap between overall availability and top-quality collecting. PCGS estimates roughly 182.5 million survivors across all grades and nearly 11 million at MS65 or better, yet its expert commentary has described MS67 pieces as scarce. This is why experienced collectors rotate a promising quarter beneath a single light source. Original mint luster should flow across the surfaces in a cartwheel-like pattern rather than appearing lifeless or artificially polished. They examine whether tunning is natural and visually pleasing, whether marks fall in prominent focal areas, and whether the strike presents the design convincingly. Copper coin classifications such as red, red-brown, and brown do not apply to these clad quarters. Here, originality, brilliance, tunning, luster, surface preservation, and overall eye appeal carry the visual argument. A technically impressive coin with ugly spotting can lose collector enthusiasm, while a beautifully balanced example can inspire stronger competition. Only after establishing that level of scarcity does the market evidence become meaningful. For the no-mint mark 1978 circulation strike, PCGS records an auction result of $2,875 for an MS67 Plus example sold in March 2021. The auction listing shows why that figure cannot responsibly be attached to an ordinary 1978 quarter. The specimen was PCGS certified at MS67 Plus, and the listing reported a PCGS population of only 6 at that grade, with none higher at the time of the transaction. That is condition rarity in its clearest form. The buyer was not paying thousands simply for the numerals, 1978. The competition centered on a coin occupying the extreme upper edge of certified preservation for an otherwise common issue. A different MS67 or MS66 coin should not automatically inherit that result, and a circulated example certainly should not. Values around $1,150, $2,450, or $3,750 should therefore never be presented as generic expectations for 1978 quarters. A four-figure valuation would need genuine market support from extraordinary certified grade, a significant authenticated error, or another independently verified characteristic. The $2,875 transaction provides something much more useful than a sensational number. It demonstrates how population scarcity and grading can override absolute mintage when registry-level collectors compete. Even then, auction prices are historical transactions rather than guaranteed future values. Population reports change as additional coins are submitted. Grading standards and market preferences can evolve. and two coins carrying identical numerical grades may generate different bids because one possesses superior luster, tunning, strike, or overall appearance. Current value must therefore be established from recent comparable sales, certification, population information, and actual collector demand rather than an old auction record viewed in isolation. Errors open another investigative path, but this is where careful authentication becomes essential. Genuine mint errors occur when something goes wrong during planchet preparation, feeding, striking, or another stage of production, and 1978 quarters with authenticated striking abnormalities do exist. One particularly useful documented example is a 1978 Washington quarter certified by NGC as AU58 and described in heritage auction records as double struck with the second strike rotated in the collar. It sold for $198 in July 2022. The relatively modest price is instructive because an error's dramatic appearance does not guarantee a four-figure valuation. Error value depends on the type of mistake, severity, visibility, rarity, preservation, authentication, and demand. When examining a suspected error at home, begin with measurements rather than assumptions. A normal quarter should approximate the standard 5.67 gram weight and 24.3 millimeter diameter. An abnormal weight, incomplete design, strange edge, or unusual metallic appearance may justify specialist examination, but none independently proves a mint error. Post-mint damage can mimic extraordinary features. Impacts can flatten letters, machinery can distort edges, chemicals can alter color, heat can change surfaces, and intentional modifications can create convincing-looking abnormalities. Likewise, machine doubling should not automatically be advertised as a valuable doubled die. A genuine die variety must match repeatable diagnostics associated with the die itself. Major grading service references should be consulted before assigning a famous variety name to a coin, and when reliable attribution for a claimed 1978 variety cannot be established, the responsible conclusion is simply that it remains unverified. That caution protects collectors from paying rarity premiums for ordinary damage. Authentication becomes even more important when a coin appears unusually valuable because rarity can be destroyed or manufactured deceptively after a quarter leaves the mint. Start by checking whether the date and mint mark have the correct shape, position, and relationship to surrounding design elements. Compare weight and diameter with official specifications, inspect the reeded edge, and study the surfaces under magnification for evidence of tooling, added material, artificial coloration, plating, or alteration. For a no-mint mark coin, remember the West Point story, but resist the temptation to turn historical possibility into an attribution. PCGS explicitly explains that there are no distinguishing marks allowing collectors to separate the West Point-made 1978 quarters from Philadelphia production. Preservation requires similar restraint. Never polish a promising quarter, even when dark tunning or fingerprints make cleaning seem tempting. Abrasive cloths, metal polish, household chemicals, brushes, and rubbing can create hairlines and remove the microscopic surface texture responsible for natural mint luster. Once those original surfaces are disturbed, no amount of additional polishing can restore them. Handle a potentially important coin only by the edge, preferably over a clean soft surface, and place it in an inert coin holder rather than loose plastic containing harmful PVC. Stable temperature and moderate humidity are preferable to garages, damp basements, attics, or locations exposed to chemical fumes. If a coin appears capable of competing at an unusually high grade or displays a convincing mint error, professional certification can establish authenticity, attribution where recognized, and grade while providing long-term physical protection. The grading fee itself should still make economic sense. Submitting every ordinary 1978 quarter simply because it looks shiny can cost considerably more than the coin's potential premium. After following the evidence from date and mint mark through strike, luster, surfaces, errors, authentication, and auction history, the 1978 Washington quarter becomes interesting for a reason far more convincing than any promise of hidden treasure. Philadelphia's reported 521,452,000 piece production, incorporating West Point output, makes the no mint mark circulation issue fundamentally common, while Denver's 287,373,152 quarters and San Francisco's 3,127,781 proofs provide additional collecting paths. Yet enormous production does not mean that every quality level remains equally available. Decades of circulation, careless storage, contact marks, cleaning, environmental exposure, and simple mishandling continually reduce the number of coins capable of satisfying elite grading standards. That process explains why the Philadelphia MS-67 Plus example, recorded at $2,875, could attract serious attention, while ordinary circulated quarters remain common. It also explains why experienced collectors begin with observation rather than price. Identify the mint attribution, evaluate the date and lettering, inspect Washington's cheek and hair, examine the eagle's details, rotate the coin for original luster, look for distracting marks, consider the strike, investigate anything genuinely abnormal, and judge the total eye appeal. Proofs must be evaluated within their own category, Denver coins within theirs, and extraordinary errors according to authenticated error diagnostics rather than internet speculation. Long-term collectability rests on the same principles. The strongest examples are those whose importance can be demonstrated through originality, preservation, recognized rarity, and certification, not through exaggerated asking prices. In that sense, the 1978 quarter teaches one of the most useful lessons in modern American numismatics. Hundreds of millions of coins can share the same basic design, yet the market may treat one extraordinary survivor very differently because collectors are ultimately competing not for the date alone, but for the quality and rarity preserved on that individual piece of metal. Next coin. The 1990 D Washington quarter is the kind of coin millions of Americans handled without ever having a reason to stop and study it. Yet under the controlled light of a grading room, an extraordinary example can become something entirely different from the quarter remembered from cash registers, parking meters, and pocket change. The date does not announce a famous low mintage, and the small d beside Washington's hair does not automatically identify a rarity. Fact, the sheer quantity produced makes the deeper collector story more intriguing, because specialists are not searching for just another 1990D. They are searching for the tiny fraction that survived mass production, mechanical handling, transportation, circulation, and decades of storage, with remarkably little evidence of that journey. Tilt one beneath a lamp, and the investigation begins with its luster. Move closer and Washington's cheek becomes a landscape of possible contact marks. Turn the coin over, and the eagle's feathers, breast, wings, and surrounding fields reveal whether the strike and preservation rise above ordinary production quality. For advanced collectors, differences that seem microscopic can determine whether a quarter belongs in an inexpensive album or near the top of a competitive registry set. That is why certain authenticated examples have attracted serious attention despite the enormous original mintage. As we follow this coin from the Denver presses to the modern certification market, the evidence will reveal exactly which characteristics matter, how condition rarity develops, and what verified high-grade examples have actually brought when collectors competed for them, without confusing those exceptional specimens with the hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters carrying exactly the same date and mint mark. The scale of production becomes clearer when we return to Denver in 1990. The United States was approaching the end of a decade of major economic and technological change, while the country entered a mild recession beginning in July of that year. For the mint, however, the quarter remained fundamentally a piece of working currency, not a commemorative product intended to become scarce. The Denver Mint struck 927,638,181 Washington quarters dated 1990D, while Philadelphia produced 613,792,000 of its own circulation strikes. That makes the Denver issue extraordinarily common by traditional rarity standards. The D Mint mark identifies Denver production and appears on the obverse near Washington's tied hair, allowing collectors to separate it immediately from the Philadelphia issue. Physically, the coin followed the clad specifications that had defined circulating quarters since silver was removed from the denomination in the 1960s. It weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and carries a reeded edge. Its outer layers are composed of an alloy containing 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded over a pure copper center, which is why a normal example often reveals a copper-colored stripe when viewed directly from the edge. That exposed core is not a missing metal error, it is part of the intended construction. Those specifications also provide investigators with a baseline. When an apparently unusual quarter appears, weight, diameter, edge structure, color, and metallic composition become evidence that can help determine whether the coin is normal, damaged, altered, or potentially something that deserves professional examination. With almost 928 million Denver pieces entering the system, however, scarcity could never depend simply on finding the date. It had to emerge somewhere else. That somewhere else becomes visible when we examine John Flanagan's design as a grader would rather than as a casual observer. Flanagan's Washington quarter originated in 1932, created for the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, and the basic design remained remarkably durable through the 20th century. On the 1990 D obverse, Washington faces left, with Liberty above, In God We Trust at the left, the date below, and the Denver Mint mark positioned behind the lower portion of the portrait. The reverse presents Flanagan's heraldic eagle with wings extended, standing above a bundle of arrows and accompanied by olive branches, combining imagery associated with national strength and peace. United States of America arcs above, EPLUBUSUNUM appears beneath it, and quarter dollar identifies the denomination below the eagle. But forget the symbolism for a moment and watch what happens when the same artwork is viewed as a grading map. Washington's cheek is broad and exposed, making even small contact marks conspicuous. His neck, jaw, hair, and the open fields can reveal abrasions or friction that separate an untouched coin from one that has circulated. On the reverse, the eagle's breast and feather details help expose weakness or wear. High-speed commercial coin production was never designed to protect every finished quarter individually. Coins dropped against other coins, moved through equipment, entered containers, and accumulated contact before reaching the public. Consequently, a quarter can technically remain uncirculated while still carrying enough production and handling marks to limit its grade. A brilliant surface alone proves very little. Collectors want brilliance combined with clean focal areas, a convincing strike, natural surface texture, minimal distracting marks, and eye appeal strong enough to survive increasingly unforgiving scrutiny. Professional grading is where those observations are converted into a hierarchy, and the 1990 D demonstrates how abruptly that hierarchy can narrow. Mint state coins occupy MS60 through MS70 on the numerical grading scale, although theoretical perfection at MS70 is extraordinarily demanding. At MS60, a coin can be uncirculated, yet heavily marked and visually unattractive. MS63 generally presents a more acceptable appearance. MS64 improves further. MS65 represents gem quality, where stronger luster and cleaner surfaces become important, and MS66 demands still better preservation. Then the difficulty rises sharply. PCGS expert commentary has characterized the 1990 D as very common overall, with MS66 examples somewhat scarcer but still obtainable, while MS67 coins become genuinely scarce. That is condition rarity, the scarcity of a coin at a particular quality level rather than scarcity of the issue itself. Population reports must always be treated as changing snapshots because additional submissions, crossovers, and grading activity alter the numbers over time. Even so, historical certification evidence demonstrates how difficult the upper end has been. When Heritage offered an MS67 Plus example in January 2018, the auction catalog reported 33 PCGS coins at MS67, only 2 at MS67 Plus, and none finer at that moment. The auctioneer described the specimen as fully struck and brilliant, exactly the qualities advanced collectors seek when tiny differences determine ranking. Color terminology also needs precision. The RD, RB, and BN classifications familiar from copper cents do not apply to a clad Washington quarter. Collectors instead evaluate brilliance, natural tunning, luster, spotting, surface originality, strike, and visual balance. Rotate an untouched high-grade coin under light, and its mint luster should move naturally across the surfaces. Polishing can create shine, but it cannot reproduce genuine mint-created flow lines. Only now does the market evidence make sense, because the price belongs to the quality, not merely to the date. PCGS records a verified auction record of $1,440 for a 1990D Washington quarter certified MS67+, and sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2018. Heritage's original listing confirms the $1,440 result and shows that the coin attracted 20 bids or registered phone bidders. At the time, its MS67+ designation placed it among only 2 pieces at that level in the reported PCGS population, with none graded finer. The combination of certification, extreme condition rarity, full strike, brilliance, and registry competition explains the result far better than the words 1990D quarter ever could. It also demonstrates why assigning arbitrary values such as $2,100, $3,200, or $3,900 to ordinary examples would be misleading. Reliable evidence does not support those numbers for normal 1990D quarters simply because they share the date. More recent auction activity reveals another side of the market. Heritage sold a PCGS MS67 example in April 2024 for only $109, dramatically below the historic MS67+ record. By July 2026, NGC's guide described circulated 1990D quarters as generally worth only modest amounts above face value and stated that pristine uncirculated pieces could sell for as much as about $650 in its market overview. These figures are not contradictions. They demonstrate how grade, population, timing, certification, and demand can reshape the market. A single plus designation represented an important distinction in the record-setting transaction, while later population growth and changing competition can affect what collectors will pay. Auction records document what one specific coin achieved at one specific moment. They are evidence, not guarantees, and a raw quarter cannot legitimately inherit the value of a top population certified specimen merely because its owner believes it looks similar. The investigation becomes more delicate when someone discovers a 1990D that appears strange, because this is where legitimate minting anomalies and ordinary damage are frequently confused. A genuine mint error must originate during manufacture. Unusual appearance alone is not enough. Modern US coinage can exhibit authentic categories such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, multiple strikes, wrong planchet errors, and clad layer problems. But no responsible collector should assume that every oddly colored, misshapen, or doubled-looking 1990D belongs to one of those categories. The standard PCGS Coinfax entry for this issue does not present a celebrated major die variety as the defining collectible feature of the regular 1990D, so claims involving supposed rare double dies or spectacular varieties require independent diagnostic evidence rather than internet descriptions. Mechanical doubling can flatten or shift portions of letters and numerals without creating a true double die variety. Damage from tools can deform a rim. Heat can change the coin's color. Chemical exposure can attack the nickel surfaces. A dryer or industrial machinery can distort an edge. Plating can create an unnatural metallic appearance. Even a light-colored or copper-colored surface does not automatically establish a missing clad layer. Begin with the known specifications: approximately 5.67 grams, 24.3 millimeters, a reeded edge, and the expected clad construction. Then inspect the relationship between the abnormal area and the surrounding metal. Genuine errors usually display characteristics consistent with the mechanics of mint production, whereas damage often displaces, cuts, scrapes, compresses, or chemically changes metal after striking. If the anomaly could materially affect value, professional authentication is far safer than attaching a dramatic label to it. Reliable grading services can determine whether the piece is genuine, identify recognized errors or varieties when appropriate, and distinguish mint-made abnormalities from alterations that occurred after the coin entered circulation. Preservation introduces a different kind of collector psychology because the natural impulse to improve an old coin can destroy exactly what sophisticated buyers value. Suppose a 1990D appears unusually clean, with strong detail and almost no visible circulation wear. The worst first move is often cleaning it. Metal polish, baking soda, abrasive cloths, brushes, chemical dips used without professional knowledge, and even vigorous rubbing can disturb the microscopic texture responsible for original appearance. Under magnification, cleaned coins may reveal parallel hairlines, unnatural brightness, dull patches, or luster that no longer flows correctly around the devices. Fingerprints can become permanent as oils and contaminants react with the surface. A promising quarter should therefore be handled by its edge, preferably above a soft surface where an accidental drop cannot add a fresh rim bruise. Inspect Washington's cheek first because it is one of the strongest focal points, then move to the hair, neck, fields, lettering, date, and mint mark. Turn the coin over and examine the eagle, arrows, olive branches, and exposed reverse fields. Look for continuous original luster rather than simple shininess. If tunning is present, determine whether it appears stable and natural rather than assuming that any color must be removed. Storage should use inert numismatic holders and a reasonably stable, dry environment away from PVC, sulfur-rich materials, excessive heat, moisture, and chemical fumes. A coin already sealed in a reputable third-party grading holder should generally remain protected there. Counterfeit concerns are less intense for an ordinary circulated 1990D than for classic key-date silver coins, but alteration becomes economically relevant whenever someone attempts to manufacture a supposed error or deceptively enhance a high-grade-looking specimen. Certification provides greatest value when the potential coin is sufficiently unusual or sufficiently high-grade to justify the expense. Seen from that perspective, the 1990D Washington quarter tells a much larger story than its 25-cent denomination suggests. Its 927,638,181 piece Denver mintage places it among the massive output modern issues that were created to work, circulate, collide with other coins, and disappear into everyday commerce rather than remain pristine collectibles. That abundance is precisely why the finest survivors create such an interesting paradox. An ordinary worn example has no claim to the $1,440 auction record, and even the April 2024 MS-67 sale at $109 demonstrates how dangerous it is to assume that every high numerical grade will reproduce an earlier result. The historic MS-67 Plus Heritage specimen occupied a much narrower competitive category, and its fully struck, brilliant appearance combined with a tiny reported top-grade population at the time. Modern collectors therefore approach the issue by assembling evidence in layers. Verify the Denver Mint mark, confirm normal physical specifications, separate wear from weak strike, evaluate surface marks, study original luster, reject cleaning and artificial enhancement, authenticate suspected errors, check current grading populations, and compare the coin only with genuinely comparable certified sales. The long-term significance of the issue lies partly in its place near the end of John Flanagan's original Eagle Reverse era, which would conclude after 1998, when the state quarters program transformed the denomination beginning in 1999. More importantly, it demonstrates a principle that reaches far beyond Washington quarters. Mintage rarity and condition rarity are not the same thing. A mint can manufacture nearly 1 billion coins, yet time and handling can make near perfection dramatically less common than the production figure suggests. For collectors, the challenge is not to imagine rarity where none exists, but to recognize genuine quality when the evidence is finally there. And sometimes, the next ordinary-looking coin is worth examining simply because you have not yet discovered what its smallest details can tell you.